Hello and welcome to the Movie Moolah Podcast. I am your host, Ben Yenny, and with me today is Brittany Devries. Brittany is a Panamanian filmmaker who I've known for years and is here to talk about shooting in Panama, the Panamanian Film Fund, and several other things. Let me know anything I forgot, Brittany.
Well, I'm actually a filmmaker living in Panama, but my nationality is from the US. My company is a Panamanian company, however.
Thank you for the correction. And also to be clear, you are not a member of the Panamanian Film Commission or any official government organization in
No,
Panama, correct?
that's correct.
Okay. Just getting those out the way up front. You only came into your own as a filmmaker once you lived in Panama, correct? So, Brittany, how did you end up in the film industry?
Well, I did not take a traditional path, although I feel like in the film industry, there really isn't a traditional path. I think we all know a lot of people from varied backgrounds. I seem to know an inordinate amount of lawyers who have transitioned into filmmaking in one way or another. So that's very interesting. But I actually had started out working with the nonprofit sector, working with finance, investors, high net worth investors, and then took a hiatus for several years while we were raising our family here in Panama. And at that point, I was invited to be a part of a project. I was told it was with student filmmakers, and they needed some help to set up interviews and put together, a short piece, if you will. And from there, I discovered that I was a natural born producer and I loved film and I loved how it could be used as a medium to promote conversations, to promote change. And I just learned by doing basically and kind of threw myself in headfirst.
Yeah, I think that's how most of us work. I mean, I actually started out wanting to be a writer director. And then I know it's shocking. And then I went to film school and kind of realized that I was good at producing. And then I took a couple years off to sell insurance because I needed money. And I realized I hated selling insurance. So I moved to San Francisco and started going to the American film market. And it was only through that I ended up in sales distribution as a producer's rep. The point of that story is more to illustrate that I don't think anybody in the film industry, with some very few exceptions, really ever start out wanting to be where they end up. And sometimes we end up in places that are significantly more suited for us, or even arguably better than where we thought we wanted to be originally. But not everybody is born wanting to be a director and ends up with tons of money to make their movies. That's just not the standard path. It does happen. It's rare. So what was one thing you found surprising about working in Panama?
I think for me, what's been surprising and also exciting is just to see the growth that's happened here in a very short period of time. I feel like it's very much an emerging market, and there's so much film being made, significantly more than when I moved here 14 years ago. And when I started my production company, Seedling Media Productions, 10 years ago, there's just so much more happening. There's so much more going on. The Panamanian filmmakers are getting much more notoriety internationally. There's more events here. There's more incentives. I feel like it's a very exciting place to be and to work right now.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have distributed some Latin American films. But not that much comes across my desk from south of Mexico, basically. And it's a little surprising to me. Are there a lot of films in, like, at a guess, how many films would you guess are made in Panama every year?
Right
Easy.
now, I think we're averaging about 10 feature films a year, and that includes documentary. And that's largely, thanks to the film fund, because it's really incentivized local filmmakers to make feature films, because it's difficult, especially in our region in Central America, to pull together the finance that's needed to make a feature film, whether it be documentary or fiction.
I mean, it's difficult no matter where you are to pull the finances
Yeah,
together. Most
for
people
sure.
say it's probably the hardest thing about making a film. But I'm a little surprised that there are 10 a year, because I don't feel like many make it out.
It is an issue that we have. I think, again, like, because it's an emerging industry, you're starting to see more films be commercial and make it to the international market. But there are a lot of films that are made that they have a festival release. They do the international festivals, but as far as something wider and maybe, more longstanding, it's that hasn't been happening as much. So there's definitely a push to make films more commercial, to be ready for the international market, so that people, know that Panama is making movies.
That makes sense. So you mentioned the film fund. Have you gotten funding through the film fund?
Yeah, so we applied to the film fund in 2020 with a feature fiction film. It was the writer director's first film, and we won. Yeah, we won. So we won one of the three prizes. There's three prizes for production of fiction films in Panama. And at that time in 2020, they were awarding between 420,000 and 460,000 US, and we received 460,000 US to produce the film here in Panama.
That sounds very useful to making a
Yes,
film.
it was. It was very exciting. It was very exciting. So yeah, so we applied, because when you apply, it's the director, the producer, and the production company. So I was the producer, and the production company was Ceiling Media Productions, and then with the writer director. But it's a very comprehensive application that you have to fill out. You have to detail your cast, you have to detail your crew, you have to give, a finance plan, marketing plan, full budget. I mean, everything. So it's quite intensive to put it all together. But we were very fortunate. We won, and we got very high marks, high points, because you're graded by judges for the application, and we got very high marks.
Well, that's good. I mean, you and I met at the American Film Market a number of years ago. I'd rather not specify, because I'm getting a little long in the tooth myself. But do many filmmakers from Panama make the trip out to any market? I mean, you and I also saw each other at EFM and Con this year, so it seems like
Right.
you're a bit of a world traveler. Is that common?
I probably do the most markets of many filmmakers here. That's just something I've really prioritized because I see the value in it. Definitely, like, when I first saw you, when I met you, I actually was there partly because of an incentive from the government of Panama, and they were supporting a select group of projects and filmmakers to go to the film market to give them that exposure and that experience. And I think at that time, there weren't a lot of people locally that were going to markets regularly. But now, again, like I feel as things have grown and more films are being made, people are traveling a lot more and going to different markets and labs and participating in ways.
To some degree, all industries these days are global, but I feel like the film industry in particular is especially global. Maybe that's just because I actually do some international sales, so I see that firsthand. But I don't feel like if you're making a widget or a game, you really need to think about exporting it to hundreds of international territories the same way you really need to as a filmmaker, at least in this day and age. Given that you grew up in the US, even if you weren't making films in the US, have you noticed any differences in the content we release from each of these countries that are indicative of the cultures where these films are being released from?
Well, it's a very interesting subject, and I have to say it's one of my favorite things to do at the market, wherever I am, is to kind of take a little turn around and just go and look at all the posters. And the posters are indicative of the market and the region in which we're in, and obviously what people are buying. So, for example, the American film market is very genre driven, and the posters are a great source of entertainment for me always. And I think, could definitely make a coffee table book with some of them, the more extreme that they get, depending on which floor you're on. Um, so,
I want to
I
make that book now. I'm pretty
think,
sure you could license those posters.
yeah, yeah. So, definitely the US market and the North American market is more genre driven for sure. I
Mhm.
that they're very clearly at the market, and then at the European film market and that ecosystem, because it's all these separate ecosystems of, first ways of making film and financing film, and also the types of film that are being made or financed in the independent space.
Mhm.
The European film market is much more auteur, artist, beautiful, thoughtful posters. Uh,
Mhm.
there's fewer genre films, but there is still genre. There will always be genre, but and then in Latin America, I noticed in Ventana Sur, it's it's definitely like much more heartfelt, thoughtful stories, local stories about different persons, very intimate usually. Um, Maybe not as much genre, kind of more on the drama side
Well, I
of
mean,
things.
that is how that tends to work. The reason that sales agents, that when somebody says that they've got a drama, every sales agent kind of has their eyes glaze over for a minute until they mention either it got into Sundance, or it has this big name in it. Those are about the only times that we start to perk up again. It's not like family movies, complete opposite. But we it is interesting how most of the Latin American markets seem to be like that, but most of the Latin American markets are also pretty regional, aren't they? They're not like any of the big three, which would be AFM, EFM, and Con, which are really global markets.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the content currently that's being made in Latin America stays within Latin America,
Mhm.
and even country to country, which is something that filmmakers have really talked about a lot. Just there's a common language, Spanish being spoken, and yet those films aren't moving from country to country, which is very interesting. I think it's starting to open up a little bit, especially with different distributors like Cineapolis, who are operating regionally, and they're
Mhm.
starting to move films a little bit more from country to country, which is which is helpful. But yeah, it is kind of a bit of a phenomenon.
That's not just, I mean, the same thing happens in the US to an extent as well. It's not like a film that's big in Florida will only ever be big in Florida. It's not that regionalized, but there are films that perform significantly better in the Southeast or the Southwest or the coasts or Middle America. There are like other regions where you kind of have to figure out how you're going to release. Unfortunately, most US buyers don't take that into account at all. And that's to the detriment of the film in a lot of these cases. This is something that we were trying to roll out a model for at Mutiny, but we ended up selling before we could really finalize everything on that. But it is a very interesting concept that I think is almost necessary moving forward, really.
And to your point, I think different countries also have different taste in films. So it tends to be obviously that the films that are made within that country, within that space, are often tailored to that particular taste or style. It's pretty easy to see when a film is Mexican or it's coming from Colombia, or it's coming from Spain. There's very like specific tells. But I think really it's more just like anything else, just like food. It's really more exposing the audiences to what's available, what's out there, and having them experience it firsthand for themselves. I think that changes people's taste over time.
Yeah, I mean, my tastes have changed pretty significantly since I've been in the industry, and that is frankly one of the flaws of being in the sales industry, is how much your tastes change and how it moves you away from a standard normie perspective on it, which kind of makes you worse at your job, frankly. It's there are ways around it, but most of the time it means that we really just become connoisseurs of genre films, and we really understand what works in a genre and what doesn't. And when we think a genre break might work, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, the thing is, no gatekeeper knows what they're doing 100% of the time. If you're lucky, you have a 50% win rate. That's like, you should be going to the World Series if that's where it is. It's but it's actually very analogous to batting averages. If you've got a 50% rate, you're doing really well. If you've got above a 30% rate, you are still a professional at this. It's only like once you get below 20% that people start to raise a side eye. But that was a pretty far cry from what we were talking about. So
But it's interesting though that you say that, because I did have a conversation yesterday with a producer friend of mine, and her and I were talking about pitching, projects and talking to sales agents and distributors. And on one hand, you almost feel like it's a hopeless situation because you have no idea what people want. And then on the other hand, it's hopeful because at that moment in time, they may want something, like they may want your thing. They're like, this is the thing that we've been looking for at this moment. And then 4 months from then, they're not looking for that because they're looking for something else. So, like you said, it's this batting average, that game that's being played. And on the other side, the content creators, the producers, people that are bringing the content, we don't always know if we have the flavor of the moment, or even if we're talking to the right gatekeeper, like, oh, this person doesn't want anything to do with dramas, but this other person definitely wants a heartfelt drama.
wait, who wants a drama? That's actually impressive.
A lot of people out there.
So I mean, you're totally right though. I mean, mandates change on a practically hourly basis. It's we ended up getting a decline from one film, actually two, from a big buyer in the US, only to a week later have them reach out and say resubmit because their mandate changed. And then they bought both those movies like literally a week from submission.
Yes.
It's a very strange market to exist in, and it's the best thing you can really do as a filmmaker is to fit yourself within the broader genre constraints, because those are fairly stable. Like dramas are always hard, comedies are always difficult, name dependent, and extremely execution dependent.
And also don't necessarily travel
Oh yeah.
country.
I mean, that's the thing. Like
Very-
internationally, what makes us scream and is and what oh yeah, what makes us scream is always very, very universal. What makes us laugh is not. What makes us emotional is not. That's why comedies and dramas have such a hard time on getting any international play. But if you are a filmmaker making this, just make a genre piece. Action pieces are safe. Generally, they're hard to make on the cheap, though. Horror films, that line is like always close to saturation, and sometimes it gets oversaturated, but like 2 days later, it's back to we need more. It's such a weird market. But thrillers are kind of like a less reliable and more execution dependent version of a horror. Family films, everybody across the globe sometimes needs Uncle Television to babysit the kids, so they're pretty much always safe. And then I guess the last one, I've forgotten what I've already said, but stick within these broader genres, and I'll link I'll try to link a thing on genre in the show notes here, but try to stick within the general genres and make whatever subgenre makes you happy beyond that, because those subgenres are what go in and out of vogue on a weekly basis. And that's
Yeah.
where you're going to end up. If you try to tailor it for what's hot now, you're going to be a year and a half out of date by the time that happens. So, was there anything, I mean, to be fair, I think most people listening to this podcast would kill for 420 to 460,000 in government money to make their movie. Everybody would be very happy, but I am curious what it's like working within that system. Is it limiting in some way? Are there some strange idiosyncrasies?
Um, as a producer here in Panama with the working with the film fund, the main challenge that we face right now is how the monies are awarded. So you apply jointly with the director, but the director becomes legal representative. And he then manages or has control of the money unless you put in a long list of checks and balances that not all producers, including myself, know exactly how to execute because it's not made clear. And it's such a different system here. And it's unlike any other country I've operated in. And even regionally, talking to other producers, they're pretty baffled by how the fund itself is structured. Because typically, as you know, with most funds and grants, it always goes to the production company and the producer. And they're the ones that manage the finance and the funds and execute the film with the talent, which includes the director.
Yeah,
like certainly, right. Certainly the writer director is a part of the process and is a part of the application. But as far as operations go, that's normally how it's done.
That is really strange. I've seen a lot of industry contacts because in addition to being a producer's rep, I am an executive producer, which means that I've been pretty deeply involved in a lot of financing deals, distribution deals, sales agency deals, all of these sorts of things. And I've also executed on the distributor's behalf. as I was the CEO of a distribution company. So across these literal hundreds of documents that I've seen, the default is always that the producer is the rights holder. And that's a little
But not
strange
only
that
the
it's
rights holder, but also the ones that are responsible to use the funds, and then also responsible to report the finance, like the financials. So for example, with the World Cinema Fund, your German production partner is a producer, and they, manage the monies that are given, and then they are also responsible to give those financial reports back then to the fund in Germany. And so that's just normally administratively how it's done with, as you know, most funds and most public monies.
Yeah, I mean, speaking about it from the distribution perspective, we as sales agents most of the time don't want to deal with the director. We just don't. We'll deal with the producer, with the director if they're also a producer and the rights holder, but we're dealing with them as a producer, not as the director. They're very different mindsets. Like, even when I've worked with directors in the past, most of the time they're also a producer. And a lot of the times when I've had an issue with a producer, they have also been the director of the film. I don't want to say that's all the time, but it's most. And it seems like you're kind of setting yourself up for difficulty exporting with this system in place. Because even if you just have a sales agent who isn't familiar with the system, and then hears that, oh yeah, the director holds the rights. I mean, that happens a lot. We'd just kind of be a thing, but we'd call them a producer. But there is always that's weird, that trips in the back of our brain. And you don't want too many of those, because it does start to compound and cause issues and have guards go up more quickly than they should in some cases.
The fund does require that the rights for the script be put in the name of the production company.
Well, that's good, at
So
least. I
there
mean,
is
that's less.
that check and balance, but it's more about the perception of ownership, and as well the administration of the funds that are given. So there's just been cases in the past where monies were spent, but it wasn't approved by production, and or again, like you said, when you have the case of director producer, not relying on a lead producer or someone with experience in international markets to really move the film forward with distribution, with sales and distribution.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Shifting gears only slightly. Does the Panamanian Film Fund offer any sort of distribution assistance? Like, I know Italy, there are actually different sorts of incentives a sales agent or distributor can apply for to help offset their costs for promoting Italian cinema, because it's something that there is something of a limited international market for. Given that the Panamanian Film Fund is playing with some pretty significant money, that's probably a little bit more of a reductive way of saying that than I mean. But do they allocate any money specifically for promotion of the film?
So the fund itself, like when you win the fund, the payments are divided into phases. So you have 3 payments. The first payment is made for the purpose of development and production. The second payment is made for the purpose of post-production. And the third payment is for the purpose of sales and distribution and marketing of the film.
Okay. But those are all controlled by the producer. They are not something that, like, the Panamanian fund interfaces directly with the sales agent or distributor for.
No, yeah, the Panamanian fund is not.
Okay. I mean, I don't know that much about the Italian fund. It's not something I've dealt with directly. I consult for some companies who have dealt with it directly, but we as sales agents and distributors are always looking for money and ways to make more of it. So if there's an offset for something like that, we're going to be a lot more likely to take a film that we would not otherwise take. That's just a friendly thought for any film commissioners listening out there. But the free advice. So what sort of have you tried to get recognizable name talent out to Panama?
I wanted to attach recognizable talent to this film. Unfortunately, the director didn't want to, and that was not a part of his creative vision, if you will. I do know like of other producers of other films, especially like Abner Benaim's films. He usually gets some name talent from either Mexico or Colombia, which really helps with the theatrical distribution and obviously international sales. And his most recent fiction film, Plaza Catedral, was shortlisted for the Oscars. And his main actress in there is a Mexican actress. So there's definitely local films that are being made that they're incorporating name talent from outside, but there's still a bit of pushback from some filmmakers to do that, to incorporate that, and it's also, I mean, cost dependent as well, because I mean some films just can't afford that.
I mean, I'd imagine getting them to Panama would be pretty expensive for any major names. It's I am not legally allowed to say some of the day rates that I know.
Yeah.
But I know that they're going to get doubled or tripled once you talk about going as far afield as Panama.
At least.
Because it's going to take them longer to get there. It takes more time out of them. It's significantly more stressful. It's and just speaking as somebody who travels internationally, it's draining, and you could probably lose some money on the other side.
Yeah, and time away from family and from friends and your environment, and then on production side, the added cost of lodging and food and different things to factor in.
Yeah, I mean, lodging and food is normally pretty cheap, comparably. It's the day rate you got to worry about, but it's even if you're going 5-star, which a lot of times you'll have to. That's going to be the lodging and food is going to be pretty cheap. Yeah, airfare is going to be expensive because they're going to demand first class, and LA to Panama is I don't know what that runs first class, but I both want to and very much don't want to know. But yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. I'd imagine that if you could find a way to hook them up with them and their family, ideally, up with a like couple days at on the beach in Panama,
Yeah.
at a any sort of lodge or beach house or whatever, you're gonna make that sale more easily. Because people still like to go to the beach. It doesn't matter if you're a celebrity.
That's
It's still
true.
fun.
Yeah, and I mean Panama is an exotic location a lot of people aren't familiar with, and they want to come and see and visit and travel around. So.
Yeah. So I'd imagine there are some things you could do that you would not, basically just to keep their day rate down more than anything, because by providing soft incentives would be the highfalutin business way, I would say that. I'm not sure if anybody ever uses the term highfalutin anymore. I might be the biggest grandpa on YouTube these days. So what did you think of Marche Du Film this year?
It was my first time attending, so I've never been before. I don't really have anything to compare it to aside from the other markets that I regularly attend. I do want to go again next year for sure. It is the biggest market by far. I had really great meetings. There was a lot of energy. There was a lot of people. Yeah, it was really exciting to be there in the middle of it all, and to see the different things that are going on with the different countries and incentives, and meet, international producers and talk to distributors, like all of that. Like um, it was definitely worth the time and expense, I have to say.
That's good.
And I got to see you.
I mean, there's that. I mean, yeah, that probably just ruined your trip, really. But I would say it was a lot busier than I expected it to be. I was consulting with 123 Media, and they were pretty much jam-packed the entire week. A lot of people were complaining about how slow it was who were around us. They just didn't do as much presetting as they might have, or I don't know. But the Riviera was significantly busier than the Palais, which is where we were. The I also really, really missed the croissants. Those were just amazing. And the pizza
They're
was
pretty good.
better than I expected too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that, I mean, it just kind of speaks to the local culture and flavor that you need to think about when you're making films internationally or selling films internationally. What did you go to AFM this year in 22?
I have to think about it. I don't think I did.
I didn't
No.
either. It's the only one I've ever missed since I started going. But it
No,
was
actually I
a
did. I did. That's so bad. I did.
What did you think of it this year?
AFM is not my favorite. I'll just put that out there. I go to AFM because I like to go to LA at least once a year to connect with my LA US based contacts. And as with most of the other markets, it's when everyone is there in one space and one place. So it's a great way for me to connect with everyone and touch base with everyone at the same time in the same place. But the actual market itself is not my favorite, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I still think we need all of the three major film markets that
Oh
exist
yeah,
as an
sure.
industry. I think losing any of them would actually be extremely bad for especially the low level creators. But I also kind of like EFM better.
Yeah.
Um,
EFM to
that's
me is a warm hug. Like EFM is
yeah.
friendly. Producers are there because they want to meet you and work on a co-production. So they're looking to talk, they're looking to get to know you, they're looking to collaborate. Um, Everyone's just a little bit more relaxed, I would say. At AFM, it's just bottom line. Like it's
Oh,
really fine. And you're in and out, your meetings are 5 minutes. And it's great. Obviously, if you have, finished films and you're ready to go, I mean, it's perfect for a very specific market. But I think largely for what I'm doing in the space I'm working in right now, EFM just fits much, much better.
it's yeah, it's EFM is still very commercial, to be fair. It's
Yes.
like it's
Oh
not
yeah.
like all of like when we say that there's more art house and things like that, yeah, that's true, but there's still a lot of genre there.
Absolutely.
And it's one film that I guess consulting on is a Macedonian film that came to me that I first became involved with at EFM, and it's freaking amazing. And I'm burning a lot of midnight oil on that one because it really deserves an amazing US release. But because it's in Macedonian, it is an uphill climb to get that out here.
Yeah.
It is I don't have authorization to talk about it at all, so I have to be pretty vague, but it's a phenomenal film, and it's still, it is taking a lot more herbs on me to get it out there than it would if it were in a more widely spoken language. Not even like talking, just not even going straight to English. Just, nobody speaks Macedonian. It's not a thing, really, here. So marketing it, you have to find a different marketing hook, and you have to convince the buyers that there is a way to do it, basically. So that's been a lot of what I've been working on there. But anyway, it's fairly indicative of the fact that even though it is a genre, it's kind of straddles the line between genre and art house, but there is very much a clear marketing path for genre for it. It premiered, its market premiere was at EFM.
Wow.
That's just where it was, and it's, I think, a really good example of the sorts of films that excel at EFM, and I'll probably mention what it is later, but I just can't right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, there's all types of films at EFM, and genre films, and films that are very commercial, and it's, all the markets, and EFM in particular, are really a great way for you as a producer or content creator to see, what's being made right now and what people are watching, and the caliber, of things that are being produced, or maybe in some cases not that great. I mean, as well, but it's a great opportunity to be exposed to that, and to see maybe films that are perhaps a bit more obscure just simply because of language, that really should be widely seen by, international audiences. And hopefully, I think that buyers that will continue to support these films and get them out there.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, buyers are more likely to take chances on films that are comparable to other films that have had success in the recent past. So if you're a filmmaker, if you want other films, if you want new and diverse voices to enter the marketplace, if you're listening to this, you have some power to influence that. You just have to buy the film on TVOD. That will actually help. It won't be, you don't have the power that one of these gatekeepers has, but we as gatekeepers are responsive to sales figures in a pretty significant way. Or even just watch figures on like Tubi or YouTube movies or anything like that. We pay attention to those numbers possibly more than you think, but honestly, I think it's just about as much as you think, which is a lot. So, yeah. What's the next project you're working on?
I have a lot of projects in the pipeline right now. I don't sit still very long. So I'm working on a docuseries at the moment about the history of the institutionalization of children around the world. It's quite
Institutionalization, do you like mental institution or?
No, I'm talking about children in orphanages, residential schools. So we talk about First Nations, Indigenous children, as well as other children that have experienced institutional care, but a very critical look at the history of this practice and why it has started and why it continues, and the factors that drive it forward. And it's very international, so it's different countries, not just one specific area or story or country. So I'm working on that at the moment. I'm also working on a feature. Sorry?
You have some direct experience in that orphanage system, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I founded Seething Media Productions, is with this first short documentary that I produced with the student filmmakers. And we were able to lobby for and change a law here in Panama that created a formal foster care program. And my husband and I became the first foster parents in the pilot program in Panama. And we were able to then have our 2 kids full time, and we've since adopted one, and we're in the process of adopting her half brother. And yeah, that was for me so eye-opening, that something like a short documentary made with no budget by students could make such a huge difference, and just a very like tangible difference in someone's life. And from there, I went on to produce another short documentary, a feature documentary, got involved in the fiction space, worked with Jairo Bustamante in Guatemala. Like, it just has kind of snowballed into something, much bigger and greater than I'd hoped in many ways. So yeah, that's one of my passions, obviously. And there's, some of those themes in many of my projects, for sure. Although I am looking more at genre pieces, because as you say, they do sell much better.
I mean, yeah, documentaries are really hard to export too. There might be, I mean, you probably won't get too much play in the US, sadly. But
Yeah.
I'd help if I could there. But the biggest thing is just taking the same concepts and the same themes and the same things that you actually really want to increase awareness for, but telling it within the confines of a genre piece. In order,
Yeah.
it's basically more
Yeah,
eyeballs and more thinking about it.
What I produced with Jairo is kind of in that vein of things, for sure. So yeah, but yeah, so I'm working on the docuseries, and I'm working on another feature documentary, and I'm working on a fiction feature. It's a drama, and I'm also looking at a number of different pieces. People consistently show me what they're working on, and I have to decide if I'm going to partner with them or not. And let me try to think. Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff in development going on at the moment. I'm staying super busy, which I'm thankful for.
We all have tons of stuff in development.
Yeah.
I peek behind the veil. I recorded the episode with Stinson Sneed yesterday, and we had to keep dancing around a specific IP we're in the process of going after. But that's kind of becoming a recurring theme here, is that I have to be like, can't quite talk about that yet. Moving on.
Exactly.
And I'm sure it gets annoying to listen to, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add before we move on to those last 3 questions that I ask all my guests?
I think that's it.
That's it. Okay. So I ask these same 3 questions of all my guests. You can you can answer the first question second if you like. Because sometimes it takes a second to think about. So the first question is, what are your top 3 favorite movies as it stands right this second now? They can change entirely in 10 minutes. But as we're talking right now, what are your top 3?
I think that one's pretty easy for me. My top 3 is Pride and Prejudice, the BBC version. And it actually convinced my husband that it was one of his too, because it's brilliant. It's really good. As you know. Children of God. I really love that film. And gosh, I have to think about the third one. I know about the third one. I have to say, I'm just a sap for a good story, and I do love Anna Green Gables too. It's like a classic.
I think all of those 3 are actually first time people have brought those up.
Yeah, maybe I'm a little bit different. I grew up reading, so I read every book in my local library. And I think a large part of the reason why I like some of those films is because I read the books, and for me, the films did justice to the stories that I read growing up.
Cool. So then,
And the main characters are these like feisty women that, you know, change the world and do.
I think they are the people among us with the best chance of doing so. But yeah. So the second question is, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be, and when would you give it to yourself?
Oh gosh, that's a really tough one.
The thing is, most people have more trouble with the first one than the second one. Not all.
Yeah.
You're recording 10, by the way. So
Sorry?
you're recording 10. Just, you are number 10
Oh, recording
of
10.
my
Okay, yeah.
recording. Yeah, so
Yeah. Gosh.
not a giant sample set was my point. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I try to think like what advice would I give myself? What have I learned? What am I oh
I need to get a soundboard
I don't
because
know.
I'd play the Jeopardy theme right now.
I know, right?
But
I feel like, gosh, this is a lot of pressure. I guess I kind of feel like I don't have regrets, and I feel like I've learned things, but would what I told, like if I went back to tell myself, what would I tell? I don't know what I would say to like change the course of history of things that happened.
oh, you don't need to change the course of history. You could just say, you could just build your own self-confidence.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd probably go back to the beginning of my career in film, and I would tell myself at that point that things are going to take longer than you think. It's going to be a hard road at different points, but at the end, it's worth it, and trust your gut.
That's extremely good advice. So, cool. Then the third question, which should actually be even harder.
Oh no. Gosh, you should have given these to me before. It's like
I am joking. This one's not hard. What where can people find you, and what are you looking for?
So people can find me on Instagram at My Life Panama. I'm also on Twitter and Threads, and I have a website, Seedling, www.seedling.media. And the last part of it was, what am I looking for?
Yeah.
Always looking for finance for all these projects in development. You know, great partners to work with, to collaborate with. You know, I look for stories with heart that are that appeal to international audiences and move forward, you know, change, and yeah, all genres and all topics, and that's kind of what I'm looking for.
Sounds great.
And a good iced coffee always.
Oh, see, I shouldn't have been drinking an energy drink. I should have been drinking an iced coffee. But thank you, Brittany, for taking the time. And yeah, and thank you, everybody at home, for listening or watching. This has been the Movie Moolah Podcast. I am Ben Yenny, your host. If you like this content, please like and subscribe wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, smash that bell. And if you enjoy this content, you might also find some usefulness out of my film business resource pack, which is completely free. if you go to theguerrillarep.com/resources, it's got a free indie film investment deck template, free ebook, free white paper, and a monthly content digest segmented by topic to help you in growing your knowledge base and thus your career on a manageable schedule. If you want to be the most awesome person you could be, I'm also on Substack and Patreon, links in the description. Thank you so much.
Thank you.